Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming here this evening. I'd like to thank my friend and colleague, Tony Hall, for inviting me here this evening. We've been friends for quite a few years now. And I think tonight you're probably wondering, why have I taken an interest in 9/11? And what am I bringing to this forum here tonight? Well, I can tell you right now that I have an integral reason for being involved, and that I was involved on some level in this whole scenario vicariously. And I can tell you that tonight I'm going to be able to answer some questions that have been left unanswered around 9/11. I have been researching 9/11 for 6.5 years now. But let me tell you the reason I first got involved. After completing a 650-page book, autobiography, with my wife, she keeps the door, who's right here. When we finished this book, I had been in a video presentation called Above the Law, which was another one of our colleagues, Dr. Bruce Clark, who had addressed the whole question of title unsurrendered native lands in British Columbia. And subsequently, we had used all the law relative to the 1763 Royal Proclamation, the 1704 Queen Anne's decision. We even went as far back as the 1532 Papal Bull Sublimis Deus, and then we jumped ahead in time, and then we said all of these rights on the question of title are enshrined in the 1985 Canadian Constitution under Section 35. And so basically, after critiquing all of the law and the struggle and the stance that we made at Gustafsen Lake in 1995, when finished the books, the tape had made its way all throughout North America. It was a very, very well done tape. Friends of ours had put it together and documented it, and it went all around. Well, it just so happens there was a young fella from New York, right from the city, who got a copy of the tape. And he watched the tape and had heard me speaking on WBAI. Now, I've lectured at MIT, Yale, Harvard, California, Arizona. I just finished Arizona 2 weeks ago. I have spoken at hundreds, if not 1,000 or better, different colleges and universities throughout North America since the time I've been released in 1979 from Attica State Prison and other prisons during that time. But this young fellow heard me. His name was Will O'Neill. He called me up. He got my number, and he said he heard me on WBAI in New York City. It's a Pacifica station. And when he heard that, he had gotten a copy of the tape, and he wanted to know how he could help me. And I says, well, first of all, I need to finish getting this book done, this autobiography, and I'm probably about $12,000 short. I said, so I need to find some money, do some kind of fundraisers to get this book finished. And he, surprisingly enough, said, don't worry about it. He says, I got some money for you. I said, well, who are you? I said, he says, I seen you on a tape, Above the Law, and I do have funds, and don't worry about it. I says, well, geez, that's great, because I had received a few funds, possibly around $10,000 as a result of a lawsuit that was filed after Attica years down the road. There was a multi-million-dollar settlement, and subsequently I got a piece of that, which I put towards the book. But I was still short. But again, this young man comes out of, just hears me, calls me, and offers. And so I was checking to see if this was real. I called my lawyers in New York City and asked them to go and meet with this guy and see if this guy was for real or if it was just somebody, just some kind of prank call. Well, it turns out the guy was for real. And it turns out, ironically, that the young fellow happened to be the nephew of Nelson and David Rockefeller. And O'Neill was, you know, I think it was Rockefeller's sister, and she married O'Neill. And he was a really nice guy, a nice young guy. I meet this guy, and we get together, and he puts up the remaining $12,000 for the book. So there was a blessing. The book gets printed, and of course I read a little special section for him in the book, thanking him for that in the blurb. And so, anyways, we get that book done, and a couple of months go down, and he calls me up and says, "Well, you know what? After the book is finished, he says, we need to have a book party, right? A party to release the book." And I said, "Well, yeah, that sounds good." I says, I said, "What do you got in mind?" He says, "Well, why don't you come to New York, right?" And he said, "And I'll put together a fundraiser, right, at a place called SOB's in the Village." And I said, "Yeah," and we'll get a couple of bands, a couple of rap bands and the like, and then we'll have this fundraiser, and we'll try to get, have a book party. I says, "Well, that's great." I says, "Well, I said, we'll need some help getting there." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that." So he tells me, "What day do you think would be good to do this?" And I says, "Well, I don't know. What do you think?" He says, "Well, I'm looking at around September 15th, 2001. I said, "Well, yeah, okay." Initially, I agreed to it. And then I called him back. I said, "You know what?" I said, "Maybe not." I said, "How about September 9th? That would be the 30th anniversary of the day that we rose up against the brutal regime known as the Attica State Prison at that time, and which was heard around the world." I said, that would be the 30th anniversary on September 9th. I said, "So why don't we do that? And there would be a lot of other interest of people in there, that there's commemorations of Attica go on all the time, even to today, around that time, from the 9th through the 13th. And so he says, "Okay." So we locked the date in September 9th, 2001. So I says, "Well, I'm going to bring my wife and my children, my two little ones, and our oldest boy." And so he gets us a hotel for the whole family at the Marriott Hotel, which was a block and a half away from the Twin Towers. So we get there. We rent a van. He covers all costs. We rent the van. We drive across. We got 23 boxes of books. So we bring the books in with us, and we get set up in the hotel. And I'm a New Yorker, and so I'm kind of glad to be back. And I'm calling all my friends and going to get together and have some meetings and stuff. And my family is completely like they've never left. My wife from Churchill, Manitoba, right, where the polar bears hang out, and it's about the only place I know of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you as a New Yorker, Doc. I was just gonna. One of the things you showed me from the paper was an article where Giuliani.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Giuliani. You want to tell it or?
Yeah. I'll build up to it, and then I'll run you over to Giuliani. Because I got a bone to pick with Giuliani.
Yeah, we're going to hear a lot about.
Giuliani tonight, and it's going to surprise you that Giuliani is not the man of the year that Time magazine, Rockefeller owned, puts him up to be after 9/11. But in any event, from my hotel room on the 26th floor of the Marriott Hotel, we can see the Twin Towers. My kids are going all around, and our oldest son, Dylan and Angela, they're kind of going around the city, and then we've got the little ones, and we're, Rainbow and Che, and we're taking them all around. And so they're having a great time. We're getting on a subway and going up and down, and we thought to go up the top of the Twin Towers and take a look around Jersey all over, but something didn't sit right. I just, and by the way, one of my brothers happened to be one of the foremans of the Mohawk crew that helped build the Twin Towers. And so I know a lot of people that were involved in building the Twin Towers. So anyways, and I said, I don't feel right about going up the Twin Towers for some reason. I said, why don't we go and why don't we go up to the Empire State Building? So my wife takes the kids, and they go up that day, and I go and meet with some of my lawyers. And I'm going to meet with Ramsey Clark and hang out with him for a while, him and his wife, Georgia. And we're just, just catching up, on the distance, the time and distance. Anyways, so I can see one night, I'm looking, after we have the benefit on September 9th, I came back to the hotel, and I'm looking at the Twin Towers at night. On the 26th floor, I look out the windows, and it had, there was these lights on the top of the tower, on top of the Twin Towers, but there was this floodlights on there, and it was something because here you got this dark cloud right around it, then on top of that, there's the lights. And it was just a very eerie feeling about that. I said, something is not going right over here. Something's going to happen. Now, we were given the option to stay 3 more days in the hotel. We'd already been there 10 days. But we were given the option to stay 3 more days, all the expenses paid, anything we wanted to eat, anything. We were treated royally. And September the 10th, I just got the feeling, and I told my wife, I said, you know what? I don't feel right. I says, for some reason, we got to get out of town here. I mean, get out and get out now. She says, well, why? She said, but you know what? I'm feeling the same thing. We need to go. So we just went over. I went and called Will, and I said, hey, look, we really appreciate it, but I think I'm going to go visit my sister in Buffalo, New York, because she had said, why don't you guys stop up here before you go to Quebec? I also had to do a speaking engagement on the 16th of September at McGill University. And so I said, okay, all right. So I called my sister and let her know that we're going to head up. But we started packing up. It was just all of a sudden, just packing up all these boxes. I had a little U-Haul trailer, and we put it in, and bam, we're off. We're gone. Now, as we're driving, the funny thing is that driving out of the city, now I'm thinking, because it's been a while since I've been in New York, and I'm thinking, I better take the 95 north, right, going up towards Buffalo. Actually, I should have taken the 85 or the 87 Deegan Express, and I missed my calling. But somehow we accidentally ended up driving past Logan Airport in Boston. And by that time, I said, you know what? We're on the wrong road. My wife says, yeah, I knew that when we were passing Providence, Rhode Island. So we, is there a New Yorker in here? But okay. But here we are. We're trying to get back onto 87. Okay. So this is just people rap, this is just the realities, and so here I would get back. Jesus, it's too late to get to Buffalo. So I said, you know what? We'll go down to Gustafsen Mohawk territory in Quebec, and that's where we'll spend the night. And then we'll just I'll just call my sister tomorrow. And so as we're driving, but as we were driving out in New York and the Twin Towers, I says, holy smokes. I said, I could see this dark cloud just envelope. It was a bright sunny day, but this dark cloud just coming over New York City. It had the eeriest feeling something was not right. Something was going to happen there. So we drive, we get to Gustafsen with our friend Continental Horn, the Mohawk Nation, and we're there. And we just go to sleep, and we hear about this the next day, that the Towers were attacked. Now, at this point, I'm going to ask Tony, when I started thinking about, we could have been, when I look back at the pictures of the Marriott Hotel and the destruction after this catastrophe, and I realized the building that we were in, we could have been killed. We could have been killed. Our oldest son, Dylan, had pneumonia, and while we were there, all that concrete pulverized, and as you know, asbestos laced Twin Towers. And if you didn't know, we're going to get to that. But our oldest son, certainly, if we had been out of the buildings of the Marriott, we would have been somewhere in the area where he would have been contaminated with that asbestos, and maybe ourselves. But he had pneumonia. He would have been dead very quickly. So, anyways, we could have been right there. So somehow I feel, wow, okay, why were we there? why we were there to witness, and how did we escape. Once again, get past harm's way. Get out of harm's way. Now, I started thinking, geez, I started following it, because to me it was like, this is like the hugest event, and I automatically knew at that point there was something wrong with the Twin Towers. I knew that both the Twin Towers had been financed by the Rockefellers, and I seem to have some kind of karmic go-around, tit for tat with the Rockefellers everywhere I go. I'm meeting Rockefeller families. They're doing good for me. They're trying to imprison me. They're trying to send me to the electric chair, blah, blah, blah. But I've got this rotating thing going with the Rockefellers. This ongoing thing, karmically, like we had some past lives together and we're still working something out. Whatever that is. But I've worked a few things out tonight. And it's not going to look good for the Rockefellers by the time I'm through. So, what I did work out, and I started looking, and I says, okay, I started reading everything I could, getting on the internet, plugging in 9/11, 9/11 this, 9/11 that. And I come across an article by this guy named Tom Flacco. Has anybody heard of him? Okay, this guy's an investigative reporter, and he writes 3 articles. And you've heard of Michael Rupert. Mike Rupert, who wrote this book here. You have that book? Well, it's not here, but it's called Crossing the Rubicon. Yeah, that book right there, and which I have read that book inside out. So Michael Rupert writes this book. I read this book a couple years down the road, but I look at this article by this Tom Flacco, who later teams up in 2 subsequent articles called the 9/11. Where's the front page here? Oh. All right, it's called Investment Espionage in the White House. The Bush administration links to pre-9/11 insider trading. And I get my first indoctrination by a tape that was put out by Michael Rupert, and he explains what these put option stocks are. And I said, well, geez, it's very simple that if you know the names of the control list that the Securities Exchange Commission was trying to suppress, if the names of those companies that had made billions of dollars in profits were released, follow the money, you're going to find who was behind 9/11. It's a very simple equation. But then I read this article, and I'll say, okay, let's follow the money. Now I want to play investigative prosecutor, okay, because I've been at the other end all my life, so I want to reverse some roles here, right? I want to be the prosecutor now. I want to, go after them, okay, the criminals. So I read this thing, and it's called Releasing the SEC Control List. And bear with me with this technology here, because
just keep zooming in.
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
Yeah, keep going.
All right, here you go. Releasing the SEC Control List. And then it says here, according to San Francisco Chronicle, the SEC on 10/19/01, the SEC privately asked North American securities firms to participate in an information sharing system to trace large numbers of trades and securities of companies directly affected by the attacks. Curiously, however, the SEC asked companies to designate senior personnel who appreciate the sensitive nature of the case, pre-attack insider trading, and can be relied upon to exercise appropriate discretion as point people linking government investigators and the securities industry. Then the SEC asked for the names, titles, phone numbers, and email of the designated senior personnel, according to reporter Scott Winokur. On October 2nd, 2001, Canadian securities officials confirmed that the SEC had asked firms to review records for 38 companies, suggesting that some buyers and sellers might have advanced knowledge of the attacks, according to Winokur. A scoop examination of the Center for Public Integrity's financial records of the top 100 Bush administration officials reveals ownership of millions of dollars in these 38 stocks, which would not be different from any other wealthy American, of course. However, Congress has thus far refused to make public what the Chronicle reported as an SEC control list, containing confidential information about transactions, individuals, relationships, and entities identified by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies in the probe. The existence of the SEC list would still be a secret if not for an accidental leak via the Canadian securities officials. Well, thank goodness for Canada. Thank God for Canada. Okay, now, if you also look at this list here, you'll see the NSA was destroying 9/11 data on Americans and U.S. companies. The NSA, and here it says, basically, well, we started investigating people that might have been involved around this suspicious trading on these put ops, but we stopped. And the reason we stopped is because, well, we might get sued. Now, can anybody here ever tell me when the NSA or the FBI, who did the same thing, the SEC and the Department of Treasury, and everybody just stopped looking for those 38 companies? Can anybody say, have you ever heard of them stop investigating the mass murder of 3,000 people, which are tied to those profits of death? Have you ever heard of that before?
I'm going to just intervene here and say there is no investigation going on. When a murder happens, when a homicide happens, there is a necessity to collect evidence, to go through a process. Who was the person who was charged to do that? Well, the Attorney General of New York, Eliot Spitzer, who became governor.
Who just fell on his own gun, by the way.
And happened to intervene when the owner of the lease for the World Trade Center, Silverstein is his name, Larry Silverstein, we'll get to that. He put down $14 million and bought the lease for the World Trade Center 6 weeks before the World Trade Center went down. 6 weeks before. Then he went into court and he got $4.5 billion in insurance. So he flipped his $14 million into $4.5 billion in 6 weeks. And Eliot Spitzer, who was Attorney General of the United States, and I don't know if an Attorney General goes into court and argues on behalf of a player, to me that's highly unusual, and that's a clear conflict of interest. That's what happened to Eliot Spitzer. He went in and argued that there were actually two events. Just while we're on these put options, this is Rupert's book. This is his chapter on put options, and I'd say that Rupert broke the story on put options in a way.
Yeah.
But here he's quoting, just to make it simple here, a jump in American Airlines put options 60 times, not 60% above normal on the day before the attacks. And then another source says no similar trading occurred on any other airline. So the media are starting to cover the story. CBS are starting to cover the story. But what happened that they stopped covering this story? Did we find out about the put options? Did we find out about the 38? Well, we're going to find out right now.
Yeah. I had gotten a call from a young fellow that writes for the Vancouver Sun by the name of Ian Mulgrew. And I don't know, did you grab that article? You have it somewhere?
No, I haven't touched it. It's where you put it.
No, you took it here somewhere. Okay. All
right. But, yeah, okay.
It's my buddy. We go through this all the time. Mm-hmm. But in any event, Ian Mulgrew called me and told me that actually, it wasn't Ian Mulgrew. Let me retract here. I get a call from a guy that reports for the Broadcast One TV. In Vancouver, he covered a lot of the activities that we were involved in, interviews with me a number of times for TV. I broke the story on Gustafsen Lake when I I basically stole some information from the prosecutor's office, tapes that they tried to hide showing the government man blowing up a red truck, almost killing the occupants on the inside, and also initiating firefights.
With a landmine.
Yeah, with landmines.
With a landmine.
Right?
Canada, who
and APCs.
went to the UN to get the landmine.
So I take this out. I get this from the woman that was under a gag order not to release these things. And I says, well, we're not going to I don't care. You want to put me in jail for 10 years. Okay, that don't matter to me. That's sort of a second home to me anyways. So it doesn't matter if you want to throw me in jail. But this information is going out there on the TV. And we're going to break the story and show you trying to blow up human beings and kill them, and also manufacture lies about the shooting of 2 RCMP, what never happened, and here you are laughing about it on tape. So we're going to show people the truth, whether you want to lock somebody up or not, for trying to conceal your lies. All right, so anyways, they didn't put me in jail, and the story broke, and it went all across the country. And Canadians couldn't believe it. Oh my God, we're using landmines on Canadians?
No, I'm getting confused here. This is a digression, man. We gotta go through some serious information here. So let's get to the 38 minutes.
Yeah. Don't.
I know.
All right. I'm giving some filling. All right.
Right, but we
still got 2 hours here, buddy. Hold on.
Yeah.
All right. It enhances the drama. And I'm also an actor, by the way, here today. So I'll tell you about that later. Anyways. This guy calls me up, does an interview with me, and he says, hey, do you realize that your name is being spread all over New York and around the world right now in major newspapers? And I said, no, what are you talking about? He says, what's happening is that Mayor Giuliani is running against an incumbent for his second term as mayor of New York, and in there he's running against a woman named Ruth Messenger, and Ruth Messenger, he's attacking her on her credibility by saying that she hosted a party for me when I got out of jail, quote unquote, hosted a party for an Attica cop killer. Well, that's not what happened. It was her roommate, Annette Rubenstein, who hosted the party. Giuliani tried to make me a political issue. I don't know if you remember when Bush, man, went up against the caucus and they used that Willie Horton scenario. Do you remember that? Anybody remember that? It goes back a ways. But anyways, it was another smear and disinformation campaign. And at that moment, they asked me what did I have to say about that. Because CBS in the States asked CBC to get a quote from me. And I basically said, well, you know what? As far as Giuliani is concerned, I really couldn't care what he thinks or how he's trying to use me to enhance his second bid for mayor of New York. I said it's a bunch of BS as far as I'm concerned. But I said one day this will come back to haunt him.
It's payback time.
It's payback time. Okay, so anyways, then I'm reading, and I read an article by E.M. Ogu in the Vancouver Sun. And as I'm reading, this is not the article. This is the second article he puts out, but he kind of refers to his first article. E.M. Ogu writes an article about the suspicious put option stocks and names the companies that were involved in the put option stocks.
So remember in that prior article, it said there was this leak to Canada, but they weren't going to release it, but it did come out in Canada SEC.
There was a momentary window, and then they turned around. That initial article that he put out was automatically taken off the internet, and nobody has seen the control of this since. Well, it just so happens I didn't have a printout. I just had the computer. I saw it. I wrote it down. I hand wrote it. And this is the list. This is the list that all these people haven't even been able to get yet. But tonight, you get it. You'll be one of the first recipients of the knowledge of the 38 that traded billions of dollars on the massacre of over 3,000 people.
Before it happened.
Before it happened. 2 months before it happened. All right, number one, Merrill Lynch.
Come on, put it right here. Put it here.
All right. All right, here, you're trumping at you, but you go ahead and read them.
Okay.
Go ahead and read them.
Okay.
He gets excited.
No, it makes a big difference
Go
if you
ahead,
can
read.
actually see them. Merrill Lynch. American Corps, Viacom, American Express, American International Group, Accessa, Bank of American Corporation, Bank of New York Corporation, Bank One Corporation, Bear Stearns. Happen to see Bear Stearns in the news these days?
Interjection. Did anybody reading about Bear Stearns? Yeah. Right? Whatchamacallit, J.P. Morgan just bought out Bear Stearns. They were trading on Wall Street at $30.76 a share. Overnight, J.P. Morgan bought those shares at $2 a share.
Now, Bear Stearns has a reputation for doing banking for the Bush clan, and also Carlyle Group. And Carlyle Group is going bankrupt. And Silverstein had $14 billion in Carlyle Group, which he's taken out. So Silverstein, being the leaseholder who got the lease for WTO, the asbestos-infested WTO. It was built in the early 70s, and the WTO was full of asbestos. So it wasn't a valuable property. In fact, it was a liability. And it was built in the early 70s, around the time that this building was built. And I'm pretty sure this building is got a lot of asbestos in it, too.
Okay. Continue the list.
Bear Stearns, Boeing Corporation, Carnival Corporation, Chubb Corporation, Cigna Corporation, Citigroup Corp., AOL, Time Warner, Can Financial Corporation, Continental Airlines, Inc., Communications Holding, Inc., Lehman Brothers Holding, Inc., Lockheed Martin Corporation, Lone Star Technologies, LTV Corporation.
Turn it around.
Delta Airlines, General Motors Corporation, Hercules, Inc., Marsh and McLennan, COSO, Inc., MetLife, Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter. They were actually tenants in the WTC. Northwest Airlines, Progressive Corporation, Raytheon, a major part of the military-industrial complex and making very cutting-edge new kind of weapons. Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited, Royal Sun Alliance, Southwest Airlines Corporation, United Airlines Corporation, U.S. Airways Group, Vornado Realty Trust, W.R. Grace and Company, New York Times, XL Capital. Okay.
All right. Now, having gotten that list, wrote it down, I held that list for years. I held on to that list for years and wondered why nobody was investigating, including the so-called sheriff of Wall Street. Why wasn't anybody investigating the names of those corporations? Mulgrew, in fact, then writes another article, and he then names those corporations again in the second article, but only about maybe 10 of them. But he sort of plays it down and kind of laughs it off a little bit. But in any event, I read not long after that, I had already known that the Twin Towers from other research had been laced with asbestos. And I dug up an article about why 10 reasons for false flag operations that changed the world. And in that article, there was this part of there's a quote from that article about the false flag operations, and it says the Twin Towers were an asbestos bombshell. Like many buildings built in the 1970s, the Twin Towers were constructed with vast quantities of cancer-causing asbestos. The cost of removing the Twin Towers asbestos, a year's worth of revenue at a minimum, possibly as much as the value of the buildings themselves. The cost to disassemble the Twin Towers floor by floor would have run into the double-digit billions. In addition, the Port Authority was prohibited from demolishing the towers because the resulting asbestos dust would cover the entire city, which it did when they collapsed, resulting in many cancers with a confirmed link to the WTC dust. Despite its questionable status...
You look there. And you can read it off there. And then they can see it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Despite its... Huh?
We're great.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. despite its, because I'm not getting paid for this, so thank you. At least there's some compensation. Despite his questionable status, in January of 2001, Larry Silverstein made a $3.2 billion bid for the World Trade Center. On July 24th, the Port Authority accepted the offer. Silverstein then took out an insurance policy that understandably covered terrorist attacks, which happened 7 weeks later. And then again, we have to realize who the real terrorists were, and I can tell you they weren't Saudis. To date, Silverstein has been awarded almost $5 billion from 9 different insurance companies. What was an asbestos nightmare turned into a $1.8 billion profit. Now, if you knew those buildings were laced with asbestos, why would you buy these buildings 6 weeks before the terrorist attacks and take out an insurance company? Does it take a rocket scientist to believe that, in fact, you knew those buildings were going to come down and you're going to collect off of that a big payday on put option stocks, as well as an insurance payment for a building that was a complete liability and had to come down and was already ordered to come down? I was wondering, I read another article about a fellow that worked at the Chicago Federal Reserve. His name was Bill Bergman. Bill Bergman, in his capacity in the Federal Reserve, was to investigate the suspicious put option stocks 2 months before the 9/11 happened. Well, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York castigated him and told him not to venture into there to investigate these put option stocks. He continued to investigate and then was ultimately fired by Alan Greenspan, his office, for doing his job. When I thought to myself, well, why would they fire this guy? Why aren't these people, man, just going to follow their money? Somebody's covering something up. There's a cover-up going on here, and I already knew and felt that it involved people within the systems themselves. Now, after I read that, then...
Can I do Mo Group?
Hold on a second, brother. You're going to have to sit down and relax now, all right? All right. All right.
I'm relaxed, man.
Yeah, relax. Okay. So, after I read that piece, then I say to myself, well, wait a minute. Why did they fire this guy? And I say to myself, well, who owns the Federal Reserve? Who owns the Federal Reserve? I Google in, because I don't really know who owns the Federal Reserve. I know something about the history in 1913, how it was established. But does somebody own the Federal Reserve? Who owns the Federal Reserve? Who gave the orders to fire that guy for doing his job? So I Google in, and this is what comes up. Chart of who owns the Federal Reserve. And we won't go into reading, because I'm just going to go right to my point here. All right? You can read this part and take a look at it. You see the name Rothschild in the Bank of England, right? You see Brown and Shipley. You say, hey, look at that. Alex Brown and Son? But remember the name? Buzzy Krongard? I'm just going to tell you about Buzzy Krongard here in a minute. Brown Harrisman, okay? Look at J.P. Morgan. All right? I'm going to go to this page here. It's a whole chart of who owns the Federal Reserve. The point I need to make goes to here. David Rockefeller, okay, owns the Federal Reserve. He and the Rothschild from the Bank of England. And if you look at some of Rockefeller's corporate holdings, I guarantee you that they match Brown Brothers and Harrison, American Express. Oh, there's a bunch of them. MetLife, General Motors, the whole gambit. They match the control list of 38. What does that tell you? What does it tell you? Yeah, Rockefeller's a bad guy. You better believe it. You better believe it. It tells you that Rockefeller, Rothschilds, all the CEOs of all these different companies, they all knew the skinny was going down. They were going to tear them buildings down.